JayZ is pulling out all the stops to get the child rape lawsuit against him thrown out. And in his latest move, the acclaimed rapper is now saying the case is just too old to even stand. And we got our hands on the response from Tony Busby as he stands behind his client's seemingly inconsistent story. We're going to recap the top shocking updates in the case against JayZ. Sean Carter, aka JayZ's high powered attorneys, are going all in to get the rape lawsuit against him tossed out, as they are now claiming the decades old allegations just don't hold up under the law. JayZ's lawyer is arguing that the case, which accuses him of raping a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Diddy Combs at a VMA after party in 2000, is just too old to proceed. That's just the tip of the iceberg. With the inconsistencies surfacing in the accuser's story and JayZ's team fiercely pushing to have the entire lawsuit dismissed, the drama just keeps escalating. And just recently, a judge ruled that Jane Doe can remain anonymous, but for now. We're going to take a look at this latest legal filing in just a sec. But before we get into that, I just want to give you some quick background. Just last month, JayZ was named in a shocking civil lawsuit accusing him of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl in 2000. The lawsuit, filed by Texas attorney Tony Busby on behalf of a woman known only as Jane Doe, claims that the assault happened at an after party for the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards. According to the suit, Jane Doe, who was trying to get into the award show, met a limo driver who worked for Sean Diddy Combs outside the award show. The driver allegedly told her she fit what Diddy was looking for and invited her to an after party. Once at the party, she claimed she was offered a drink that made her feel woozy and lightheaded, so she needed to lie down and went into a room to rest. She alleges shortly after, Combs and Carter came into the room, with Combs allegedly saying, "You are ready to party." She claims Carter removed her clothes and held her down and raped her while Combs and an unnamed female celebrity watched. That female celebrity is only known in the suit as Celebrity B, and it's still unclear who that female celebrity is at this time. Now, Combs has long been the subject of multiple sexual misconduct lawsuits, which he has denied all the allegations made against him, and has pleaded not guilty to the federal charges he still faces. Initially, when this suit was first filed, Carter's name wasn't attached, only referring to him as Celebrity A, but he since vehemently denied the allegation made against him. In JayZ's response, he had said that before the lawsuit was officially filed, Tony Busby, who is Jane Doe's attorney, had approached JayZ's team with a demand for a significant sum of money in exchange for not filing the lawsuit. In a statement posted to his Rock Nation social media account, JayZ said, quote, "My lawyer received a blackmail attempt called a demand letter from a lawyer named Tony Busby. What he had calculated was the nature of these allegations and the public scrutiny would make me want to settle. No, sir, it had the opposite effect. It made me want to expose you for the fraud you are in a very public fashion. So no, I will not give you one red penny. These allegations are so heinous in nature that I implore you to file a criminal complaint, not a civil one. Whomever would commit such a crime against a minor should be locked away. Would you not agree? These alleged victims would deserve real justice if that were the case. This lawyer, who I have done a bit of research on, seems to have a pattern of these types of theatrics. I have no idea how you have come to be such a deplorable human, Mr. Busby, but I promise you, I have seen your kind many times over. I am more than prepared to deal with your type." Busby, however, denied that he was trying to extort JayZ, stating that he was engaging in a common pre-litigation practice where a lawyer sends a letter to resolve a case in an attempt to avoid a lawsuit. Despite this, the two have been embroiled in a heated legal back and forth. JayZ's legal team has now filed new court papers seeking to have the case dismissed on the grounds that Jane Doe's claims are essentially outdated. Alex Spiro, lead counsel for JayZ, wrote a letter to the judge letting the court know he plans to file a motion to dismiss. The letter states, quote, "We write on behalf of defendant Sean Carter to inform the court that Mr. Carter seeks to file a motion to dismiss the first amended complaint, also known as the FAC. On December 19th, Mr. Carter sent a letter to plaintiff setting forth the basis for the motion and advising that Mr. Carter would file this pre-motion letter if plaintiff chose to stand on her FAC. Plaintiff was required but failed to respond to Mr. Carter's letter within 5 business days. By December 27th, Mr. Carter interprets plaintiff's silence as confirmation that she will stand on the FAC as pled. Accordingly, Mr. Carter submits this pre-motion letter concerning his anticipated motion to dismiss. Spiro's main argument is that the rape accusation should not be able to move forward due to issues with the statute of limitations and the applicability of New York's Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Act, also known as GMVA. In the pre-motion letter filed on Monday, Spiro argues that the GMVA cannot apply to this case because it went into effect in December of 2000 and that this alleged assault took place in September, 3 months before that. He wrote that the GMVA cannot apply retroactively to create a cause of action unavailable to plaintiff at the time in question. A contrary conclusion would violate both state and federal due to process protections. Spiro referenced a previous case in which a federal judge in the Southern District of New York dismissed a lawsuit from Jeanne Bellino, a former child model who accused Aerosmith's Steven Tyler of assault in the 1970s. That claim was rejected because the judge ruled the GMVA's revival window could not be applied to events that occurred before the law was enacted. Now, Spiro also raised another important legal concern in his filing. The GMVA passed by the New York City Council only applies to acts of violence that occur within the boundaries of New York City. Spiro writes, according to the FAC, meaning First Amended Complaint, plaintiff was driven from Radio City Music Hall to a large white residence with a gated U-shaped driveway, a drive that took 20 minutes. This is where the alleged assault took place. The FAC's description of the residence in question, however, combined with public records, confirms that any such residence, to the extent it existed at the time, would have been located outside the territorial boundaries of New York City. As such, assuming the well-pled factual allegations are true, they are not, they cannot plausibly state a claim for relief. Now, on New Year's Eve, Tony Buzbee filed his own letter to the judge, stating defendants' argument as to the GMVA is unpersuasive as it is contrary to the law's primary intention, to make it easier for victims of gender-motivated violence to seek civil remedies in court, not as defendant would have it, make it harder. Buzbee cites the Supreme Court's decision that struck down the federal right to action under the Violence Against Women Act. But our nation's highest court said that even though the federal government didn't have the authority to act, local governments could. So New York City passed the GMVA. He also cited testimony that was given in support of GMVA. In summary, there is no timeline on processing trauma. Buzbee ended the letter by requesting the court deny the defendant's request to file a motion to dismiss. This latest legal challenge to Jane Doe's filing is one of many responses JayZ's team has made to combat these accusations. Another recent motion they filed demanded that Jane Doe be forced to reveal her true identity. That filing stemmed from inconsistencies that emerged in Jane Doe's story when she gave an interview to NBC. She actually admitted in a follow-up interview that she may have made some mistakes in her recollection of events, and here are some of the apparent mistakes she made. Jane Doe said after the alleged rapes, she was able to run away from the residence and found a gas station where she called her dad to come pick her up. But her father told NBC that he didn't remember that, and that it would have been a 5-hour drive to pick her up. He also told NBC he didn't even know this alleged attack happened until he was approached by reporters. Jane Doe also claims she spoke to Benji Madden at the after party. That is, of course, the lead guitarist for the band Good Charlotte. But his representatives told NBC that he wasn't even in the area at the time. Good Charlotte was actually on tour. So JayZ's team specifically pointed out contradictions regarding the timeline and location of the alleged events in a letter to the judge, calling Jane Doe's allegations a sham. She claims the assault took place at an after party at Mr. Combs' home, but photos that night show Mr. Combs and Mr. Carter at Lotus nightclub for the after party. When pressed, the plaintiff admitted she was guessing about key details, including the time it took to reach the venue. She admits she has no single corroborating witness over the last 24 years. JayZ also told NBC in a statement this incident didn't happen, and yet he filed it in court and doubled down in the press. True justice is coming. We fight from victory, not for victory. This was over before it began. This 1-800 lawyer doesn't realize it yet, but soon. In response to JayZ, Buzbee released a statement defending himself, saying Jane Doe's case was referred to him by another firm, where her story had allegedly already been vetted. The client remains fiercely adamant that what she has stated is true to the best of her memory. We will continue to vet her claims and collect corroborating data to the extent it exists. Because we have interrogated her intensely, she has even agreed to submit to a polygraph. I've never had a client suggest that before. In the legal brief filed by JayZ's team advocating for the release of Jane Doe's name, they argued, for months an extortionate campaign has been targeting this named defendant under cover of darkness. That campaign was cynical and calculated to force payment of an exorbitant sum of money. Defendant would have to pay X millions of dollars irrespective of truth or else. When defendant refused to pay and instead took measures to establish his innocence, this unnamed plaintiff and her self-promoting counsel, whose name has been splashed across headlines and press conferences under auspices of representing her, went to extraordinary lengths to shut down fair defense. But those efforts too failed. Now at last, the false, unfounded allegations that underlie this campaign of extortion are having judicial light shined on them, except that this plaintiff is bringing them as a doe who would continue to hide under cover of darkness. And included in this brief is a preservation order suggesting Jane Doe's attorney, Tony Busby, would potentially go as far as to destroy critical evidence in the case. That memorandum in support of that motion reads, "The fundamental inconsistencies in plaintiff's case revealed in the NBC interview, coupled with Busby's chronic inability to follow the rules in this case and others, creates a substantial risk that Busby will destroy evidence damaging to plaintiff's case, including evidence of his own misconduct." But the judge issued a fierce ruling against the defense. One, whether the litigation involves matters that are highly sensitive and of a personal nature. Two, identification possesses a risk of retaliatory physical or mental harm to the party seeking to proceed anonymously, or even more critically, to innocent non-parties. Under number 4, whether the plaintiff is particularly vulnerable to the possible harms of disclosure, particularly in light of her age. Under number 7, whether the plaintiff's identity has thus far been kept confidential. While the judge acknowledged that keeping Jane Doe's identity anonymous could create challenges for the defendants in terms of gathering evidence, she ruled that the factors in favor of anonymity outweighed those against it, at least for now. The judge also clarified that the decision could be revisited at a later stage in the case. In addition to ruling in Jane Doe's favor, the judge also took a swipe at JayZ's attorneys, saying that they have, quote, submitted a litany of letters and motions attempting to impugn the character of plaintiff's lawyer, many of them expounding on the purported urgency of this case. Carter's lawyer's relentless filing of combative motions containing inflammatory language and ad hominem attacks is inappropriate, a waste of judicial resources, and a tactic unlikely to benefit his client. The court will not fast-track the judicial process merely because counsel demands it. As the legal battle rages on, the outcome remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, JayZ's team is pulling out all the stops to get his name off that suit or toss it all together. Well, I don't imagine this heated legal battle will be slowing down anytime soon, but I want to bring on now criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla to get his take on this latest court filing. Mauricio, thank you so much for being here and Happy New Year to you. I want to ask you your overall thoughts on this latest court filing from JayZ's team, where they argue the allegations are too old and occurred before the GMVA was passed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I reviewed the response that Tony filed, and in that response, they pretty much get into the legislative intent. So they're looking at the actual law, and that the actual law, the intent of the law, is not to restrict victims from coming forward, but the opposite. So I think that's one of the things that the judge is going to have to really take a look at, whether or not the legislative intent was there to make this all-encompassing and to be able to have a situation where they're not restricting victims from coming forward, regardless of what the time frame was. I understand that from the perspective of the JayZ's defense team, you have to explore all options. But when it comes to a case like this, when you're dealing with a minor, minor at the time and a celebrity, for a judge to slam it down on a technicality is something that, I mean, it could be done. I would envision that sometimes you try and do it not because you think the trial court's going to go for it, because they may not, but maybe in the future the appellate court could reverse if the case law is there and if the reasoning is there legally.
And I want to ask your take on this. Do you think that JayZ's team is kind of just throwing anything at the wall that'll kind of stick in order to defend their client?
Okay, well, when you have like a billionaire client, which unfortunately I haven't had one, but I can imagine. I mean, I've had wealthy clients, but when you have a client like him, I'm sure they're very demanding, and whatever they want, like he's spinning his wheels. So the lawsuits against the lawyer that filed, it's like a law firm all of a sudden is taking on this role, and they're just billing and filing and doing all of these things. In my opinion, it doesn't look good. You know what I mean? If JayZ was my client, I would be like, let's deal with this case, and whatever you want to do regarding the ethics or of the attorney and all that. Let's hold off because when you do it, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't look good, publicly when you attack the lawyers. And as a matter of fact, that last 5-page order that Judge Torres wrote pretty much roasted JayZ's counsel for asking for relief that's not going to be afforded to them, or asking like to speed things up, because at the end of the day, the only reason you want to speed things up is because your client's JayZ, and that's not a reason to tell a judge that you want an expedited hearing, or and I think the judge made it clear in her ruling. And I think the judge also is trying to like pump the brakes, like telling them pump the brakes on the filings, pump the brakes on what you're doing, because she already envisions that moving forward it's going to be more of the same.
Yeah, that judge did not mince any type of words in that ruling. And JayZ has been fighting for weeks to get his name off that lawsuit and try to get that suit tossed out altogether. But I want to ask your thoughts on the prior ruling where a judge ruled that this Jane Doe can remain anonymous, at least for now. Were you surprised by that ruling, and how difficult could it be to defend a client in a civil lawsuit where the accuser is anonymous?
Well, I think when you read the order, the judge left wiggle room, because she said right now at this stage in the litigation she can remain anonymous, but she even put language on there that said once the discovery process gets going, there may be a point where we're going to have to revisit this. And listen, as far as I know, we have the confrontation clause. You're able to confront your accusers, and you I can't envision that they're going to be able to move forward from beginning to end and never have her come forward at some point in the litigation. I don't think that they'll be able to successfully pursue their claims with her as a plaintiff if they conceal her identity. Now, I understand that she went forward on NBC, right? And she gave like a statement on NBC, and I heard it, or at least parts of it, and it didn't look good for her. Like, I can't imagine that her lawyer agreed for her to do that, because what came out in there in the small portions that I saw was her dad saying that he doesn't remember, her having autism, and all these problems with her sanity or mental health issues. That's just chipping down at her. And I understand that maybe part of their argument is going to be like, yeah, she's suffering from these issues because of the attack, but something like autism, it doesn't come because you were traumatized. That's something that you're born with. And so the argument is going to be like, okay, so this person that's remembering this from the time that they were 13 years old is someone that was suffering from autism. So that may call into question her ability to tell a lie from the truth, her ability to, whether or not she's making things up. I understand also in that interview that came forward that the person that she alleges drove her the 4 hours to the VMAs, I believe it is, right? Or the music award, is no longer alive. So when I saw it, I can't imagine that her attorney, agreed to it. And if he did, I think it was a huge mistake, because she's already being picked apart for what she said in there.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to the next question that I have for you. With these kind of inconsistencies that came out in this story by this NBC interview, what do you make of that now that Tony Busby has kind of been defending his client, one still, but also, still backing her story by saying another law firm recommended her to us. They had already previously vetted the story. She was willing to take a polygraph. So what do you make of kind of those stark differences between the inconsistencies, but then you still have Tony Busby, who is her attorney, still backing her and her claims and allegations?
Well, listen, he's already he's on top of the horse already. So for him to back out completely just because she said a couple of inconsistent statements, I mean, he took the case. He took the case knowing whatever issues regarding her mental health she had. And I'm sure that he did vet the case, because that you're going to get a tsunami when you file this. So this is not a regular lawsuit that you file even against another rich person or another billionaire. This is one of the most famous people on earth, really. So when you file this lawsuit, you better vet it, because you're going to get attacked. Now, the way that he's getting attacked, I've never seen this before. This is like the first time I've seen somebody get so attacked, when they file a lawsuit. But I'm pretty sure that someone like him must have, dotted his I's and crossed his T's before, accepting something like this.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a point that you had made earlier in our discussion about kind of the language being used in the filings from JayZ's attorneys. What do you make of that, where they kind of do seem to target Tony Busby in a way, which, if you think about it kind of from a PR standpoint, it kind of makes sense, right? Don't target the accuser, instead go after their lawyer. But what do you make of just kind of this targeted and harsh, fierce language from JayZ's attorneys? Because I mean, also, you have to see it, I guess, from their side too, where it's like, if you're accused of raping a 13-year-old girl, you're going to go out pretty aggressively. But do you think it's gone to a point where it's just gotten too far?
I think it's gotten too far. I don't think it looks good for JC's team for doing the personal attacks. He's a lawyer, you know what I mean, and I also think it doesn't look good for their frantic attempts to have this resolved on a motion to dismiss. They're they sent a letter which it says that they want to use like whether or not it happened in the fact of whether or not it happened in New York City, and because she said that she was driven 20 minutes in a limo and using the property appraisals or website or whatever evidence. So they should know that in a motion to dismiss, you have to look at the four corners of the complaint, and you can be bringing in additional evidence. So they're putting out there publicly in a case that's so it's so publicized, issues that are not appropriate for a motion to dismiss. So one has to say, why are they doing it? They're obviously talented lawyers. I mean, look at where they're at and look who they're defending. So the only reason that you would mention is because you want the public to know that particular issue, whether or not she was in New York City or whether or not she was somewhere else. At the end of the day, this is a person that says that when I was 13, I was raped by multiple people. And, viewers, society, they're going to want to hear this case on the merits, including the judge. I mean, I'm not saying that the judge won't dismiss it if she's legally obligated to, but many times judges won't, because they're like, no, let it go to a jury. And if that's something that's appealable, let the appellate court, handle it. But I don't think that something that involves an allegation that involves a small child is going to be dealt with on a technicality, especially one like whether it happened in New York or that's yet to be determined, and that's something that they can get into eventually. The appropriate pleading would be a motion for summary judgment once you've deposed her, once you've done all that. So one can only imagine that the reason that they put it in there is to educate the public before it even goes to trial. That's the only thing I can think of why you would add that.
Now, say you had a crystal ball. Do you see any of this being litigated anytime soon, or do you think it's possible the suit could wind up getting dismissed?
Like I said, like I don't see it getting dismissed because I think that something like this, they're going to want it to go to a jury. Why? Because these are serious allegations involving a small child at the time, a young child, and a celebrity. So people are going to say, oh, imagine the billionaire got his way. You know, the billionaire got his way. The voice of a child was snuffed out by a high profile defense team. So can it always can. I wouldn't envision it getting resolved on a motion to dismiss. I think that the judge is in a position where she's going to want people to know that you get your day in court. I mean, as it looks, based on what I saw in that NBC interview, it's going to be hard for them to prove their case if that's their victim, if that's the person that's going to testify. And you have like her dad not even remembering, and her dad even said, "I got a lot of things going on, but I think I would have remembered something like that." That's her own father. So unless they have, then again, listen, we only know a little bit of the case. We don't know really what the plaintiffs have regarding evidence, but I don't see it getting resolved in a motion to dismiss, and I see it eventually getting litigated and having it heard appropriately.
And I guess we'll have to wait and see how this all kind of continues to play out. Criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla, I want to thank you so much for your time today. But before we
Thank
sign
you.
you off, where do you think that the case or the lawsuit goes from here?
I think eventually they're gonna dismiss whatever motions to dismiss. She's not gonna grant their motion to dismiss. The discovery process is gonna start, happening like it always does. She's gonna enter probably a trial order with the dates of when depositions have to be done by, giving them instructions like federal court. Federal court is quick, as you know, like that's not state court. They resolve issues quickly, and in a case like this, I believe that the judge is going to put them on a pretty strict timeline, and they're going to want, to get this heard quickly, as opposed to, state court that could take a year, 2 years. So
Okay.
I think we'll be seeing it in for sure in 2025 get resolved one way or the other.
Yes. All right. Again, Mauricio Padilla, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you.
Well, everyone, that does it for this episode.